October 7th was absolutely horrifying, an absolutely traumatizing event for Israel. And so the impulse to do something, to go after Hamas, to defend Israelis is entirely understandable. I think what we've learned, though, is that this government under Bibi Netanyahu cannot be trusted at all to do that in a way that has any regard for Palestinian life, or any regard, frankly, to even what they're hearing from the U.S. and UK privately, which is, you need to follow the laws of war, you need to reduce civilian casualties, you need to have a plan in the long term for Gaza that is under a Palestinian administration. You can't displace mass amounts of people. That's just being ignored, And so to me, that's the reason it's untenable is because of I don't trust Netanyahu, and we can see what type of military operation they're doing. It's a maximalist military operation. I thought that there was a pause to get hostages out. I think that part of the hope or expectation was that if they did resume the military operation, it'd be more limited, it'd be more targeted. It's not. It looks the same as it did before. They've displaced, well over 1 million people. As you said, they told them to go from the north to the south. Now they're bombarding the south. Where are these people supposed to go? And so I think there should be a ceasefire because number one, you need to just the scale of human suffering is untenable. Number two, I actually think some people will say, well, you can ask them to go back to October 6th. They're not going back to October 6th. Not only have they damaged a lot of Hamas infrastructure and taken out a lot of Hamas guys, but on October 6th, the IDF, the Israeli military, was not on the border. Like they were not securing that border. They were up in the West Bank protecting settlers who were in clashes with Palestinians. They'd let their guard down. So I actually think that Israel is much more secure even today. The danger of continuing to do what they're doing is obviously to the Palestinians, but also to Israel, like the international horror at what's happening is just going to build. And you saw the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who's a former general, say publicly the other day, this could turn into a strategic defeat for Israel. If essentially they destroy the Gaza Strip, you've got 2 million homeless people, no plan for governance of Gaza, and Israel has vastly isolated itself internationally. Like whatever they destroy of Hamas could bring a different kind of cost to Israel. And so I don't think they're doing themselves any favors. So I think the best thing for Israel, and obviously for the Palestinians, is for the U.S. and the UK to be more critical here of what's happening, because I don't think what's happening is good for anybody.
You said that you would personally find yourself on a differing position to the current US-UK position. What would that position be?
Well, number one, I'd be more willing to publicly criticize Israeli actions. I mean, there's something tragicomic about where the Biden administration has found itself, because they fully literally embraced Netanyahu after October 7th, but even after they started to signal that they were going to put a siege on Gaza. And then they started, when it was clear that this was going in the direction it was going, they started to say publicly, well, we fully embrace them in public, but we criticize them in private.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a weird thing to have to say, because it's like that. Like, why not just take the next step here, guys?
Yeah.
But I think Biden is just so instinctively, as an older American politician, that's what you do. You embrace the Israeli government. The point is that this Israeli government is led by Bibi Netanyahu. So what I'd be doing is I'd be very clear about what we see publicly that we don't agree with. I would be pressing for not just a ceasefire, but a political strategy here.
Yeah.
I don't think you can destroy Hamas militarily without having a multi-month military operation that just destroys Gaza and radicalizes the Palestinian population and isolates Israel. I think what I'd be doing is saying to the Arab states, including people like the Emiratis who have a lot of money, hey, you're going to come into Gaza. You're going to be a temporary multinational kind of peacekeeping administration here. And let's work together to build a different Palestinian leadership than Hamas. Hamas absolutely has to be sidelined. There's no role for Hamas in the future politics of Palestine. But let's find an alternative leadership and invest in it and build something that can become a Palestinian state. That, to me, is the only way to really try to solve this problem in the long run. And you hear that language, we want a Palestinian state or we want a Palestinian authority to take over in Gaza. But like, there has to be a political will to press Israel to move in that direction. And frankly, Netanyahu is very weak politically in Israel. I think there's a ripeness for a new Israeli government to come in. Like, let's face it, Netanyahu publicly is not in favor of a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
There have been reports that I entirely believe because he did the same thing when I was in government.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you've been in rooms with him.
What he tells the right wing in Israel is, I'm the guy who can prevent a Palestinian state because I'm a good front man. Like some of these more right wing people in his coalition, he says to them, let me be the front man for this effort to essentially deny the Palestinians a state. And I think that, you know, there needs to be a transition in Israel that is open to not just Palestinian state, but to that kind of state building in the West Bank and Gaza. And hopefully that's where the Biden team is. They're evolving in that direction. But I think they need to get there fast. Because look, I'd say, again, it's the right thing to do morally, and I think for Israel's own security. Politically, the young voters, voters of color in the United States, obviously Arab and Muslim voters, they are signaling that they will not vote for Joe Biden over this. And it'd be pretty interesting if after everything that America's been through, Joe Biden loses the election over this.
There are much more serious issues at play here than who's going to win our respective elections. But we should stress that is appraising the situation realistically from a political perspective, that it does have consequences, particularly for centre-left parties.
Labor, I mean, the same thing I would imagine is true for Labor here, right? I mean, maybe even more so given the nature of the potential Labor constituencies. So there's a lot of reasons for I think, a shift in tone on this thing.
We were actually hearing, from a lot of British politicians, ultimately we back Israel unequivocally, but we still support in the long term a two-state solution. We see that as the only way. But what you're saying is actually, you talk about backing Israel. You're talking about an Israel led by a Netanyahu government. You have to be realistic about who is in the positions of power here. And from your experience of being in these kind of, on diplomatic missions, working in Jerusalem, working in Washington, the point you're trying to make here is that it is a contradiction in terms to say that you both support the government led by Benjamin Netanyahu and a two-state solution.
That is not possible. It drives me crazy when people say we unequivocally back the Israeli government and we support a Palestinian state, because it is not only does this Israeli government not support a Palestinian state, their objective is to prevent a Palestinian state and to increase settlements in the West Bank and to have some de facto control over Gaza probably at the end of this. Again, Hamas bears responsibility for what they did on October 7th. Hamas is not any part of any solution. But my experience in 8 years with Bibi Netanyahu is he did not want a Palestinian state. And actually, he's moved further to the right from even when I was in government.
Yeah.
And look, I would say to people that find it difficult, look, I'm Jewish. I care deeply about the Jewish people, about Israel. What I'd say is that from my perspective, because some people sometimes say to me, like, you're criticizing Israel. I think backing Israel, supporting Israel, is trying to support what I believe are better outcomes for Israel. And I think this is a dangerous path for Israel to go down. If you truly want to be a good friend to somebody, you don't tell them to keep doing the bad thing that you see them doing. You try to counsel your friend to do something different. Look, there's only three ways this goes, Nick. There's a two-state solution, or the Palestinians are pushed out of their land and it all becomes Israel, which a number of people in this coalition have said they want.
Yeah.
So this is not like me, conspiracy theory. This is the stated position of a bunch of people in Netanyahu's government. Or it's this status quo where Israel has this kind of de facto control over the West Bank. There's settlements increasing. There's a blockade in Gaza. And that status quo, we've learned, is not sustainable either. So to me, you can frame this as unequivocally supporting Israel, but I think the Netanyahu government, just like the Trump government in the U.S., just like some of the Tory governments here, are not good for the country. It's like saying that you can only be a friend of America if you fully support everything Donald Trump did when he was president.
Yeah.